and welcome to Unit 14, Module 74. This is Attributes, Attitudes, and Actions. Here are your learning objectives, and here is your vocab. So social psychology, which is what this whole unit is about, is a scientific study of how we think, influence, and relate to each other. So psychologists want to know why different people act differently in a given situation. And they really want to understand how the situation affects what we do and what we think. So 3 famous social psychologists that come up a lot on the AP exam are Philip Zimbardo, Solomon Asch, and Stanley Milgram. We're going to talk about each of those in these modules. So first, let's talk about attribution theory. So attribution theory, how we attribute, is how we explain. It's our attributional style. It's our explanatory style. So we either credit someone's behavior to the situation or the person's disposition. This was proposed first by Fritz Heider. So here's an example. We have a car accident and we have one person saying he is such a careless driver. He never watches out for other cars. So this is the way this person always is. They are careless all the time. This is who they are. He never watches out for the car. So why did he get in an accident? It's not because of the situation, it's because of the disposition of the person. He is a careless driver, and that's why this happened. Another reaction is situational, says he probably got caught in some bad traffic, and then he was late for a meeting. This is situational attribution style. So it's either one of the two. So sometimes our attribution style can lead to errors in the way of our thinking. So one is called fundamental attribution error. And this is the tendency for observers when analyzing other people to underestimate the impact of the situation and overestimate the impact of the person's disposition. So we tend to overestimate other people's personality. Why did that person not do their homework? Because they're lazy. Why did I not do my homework? Because I was really stressed out because my mom made me do all of these things and then I got home late from practice. So situation. We tend to explain our behavior because of the situation, and we have this error in thinking that everyone else, it's because that's just who they are. Instead of looking at the situation around us. Maybe the kid that you think is lazy because he presents that way at school also has a lot going on at home that you have no idea about, right? So fundamental attribution error, we tend to look at other people and focus on their disposition as being the reason for their behavior. Western cultures tend to fall victim to this type of error more often. People in East Asian cultures are more sensitive to the role of the situation. So obviously this can apply to real life, right? When a jury is looking at someone and trying to understand if the shooting was malicious or an act of self-defense, they're looking at the attribution, the cause. A voter must decide whether a political candidate will keep their promise or forget it. Or a loved one, a partner must decide if a loved one's actions were reflecting the fact that they had a bad day, situational, or that they're just a jerk, dispositional. So there are also social and economic effects. So how we look at why someone is poor or why someone is unemployed. If we're just saying that, oh, they're lazy, right? That would be dispositional. If we're looking at the situation of their education or lack of opportunity, discrimination, things like that, that would be more situational. So our attitudes and our actions. So these have reciprocal effects. So our attitudes are feelings that are often influenced by our beliefs, which are thoughts. And they predispose us to respond in a particular way to an object, a person, or an event. So one way our attitudes can be influenced is the peripheral route. So this is peripheral route persuasion. When we're influenced by incidental cues, like Beyonce selling something, and so we want it because Beyonce uses it, or we've seen her wear it, or we see her in an advertisement, right? Another route that advertising takes is by selling sex. So it has nothing to do with the actual product they're selling, but they put, for example, in this Carl Jr. Commercials, which they've done several of these, where there's just a really attractive woman and nothing much is going on in the commercial, and then at the end she picks up a burger and maybe takes a bite of it. So this would be peripheral route. It's not on the actual focus of what you're doing. It's focused on the peripheral things that influenced you. So who else is doing it, the attractiveness of the things that you get from it. So central route persuasion is when you're focused on the actual central product or topic. So this is usually done with things where they really want to prove a point. So for example, like convincing people to stop smoking, they might use central route persuasion marketing. In this example in the top right, they're focusing on why you shouldn't frack farmland, and they're giving a bunch of informative details as to why it is bad. So actions can also impact our attitudes. So people are going to believe something more strongly if they have to defend what they believe. So for example, on social media, when people discuss politics, if you question them, if you put them in a position that forces them to return and explain even more why they said what they said, you're actually helping them believe stronger in their original thoughts. You're not going to get them to change their mind. They're going to believe more strongly what they first said because now they had to defend themselves. Okay, so that causes polarization. So attitudes follow behavior. Dozens of experiments and research have found that even when people had to act against their moral standards, eventually that acting against their moral standard started to they changed their beliefs to conform to their actions. Another example of this is racial attitudes. When desegregation started, when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, Americans expressed diminishing racial prejudice. Obviously, there was still racial prejudice, for sure, there still is, but it decreased as these things as people were more integrated. So doing becomes believing. So another way of persuading people with using their attitudes is called foot in the door phenomenon. And this is when the person requests a very small, really doesn't take a lot for the person to say yes request. So for example, a car salesman might say, come by on free donut day and grab a free donut, right? Small request, you really don't have to do anything, come by, you get a free donut. Then you get there and they might say, let's go for a drive in one of our cars. Small request, you're not committing to anything, right? So the more they can get you to do these little small requests, and they can kind of keep building up on them until there's a larger request of the purchase of a car, which would be a big request, right? So foot in the door means you start out small with your requests and they grow bigger. Door in the face phenomenon is the person starts off with some huge request that is likely shut down. So, for example, you might say, Mom, Dad, I need a car. Big request, right? And that's going to get shut down. Door slams in your face. No, not happening. And then you follow it up with a smaller request. Okay, well, if I can't have a car, can I please take your car out for a couple hours tonight? So hoping that it persuades them to say yes to that. The roles that we play also affect our attitude. So roles have a set of expectations that come with them. When you became a high schooler, there was a set of expectations that came with that. And you started to, when you were a freshman, just starting out in September, you started to play the role of high schooler. You didn't really feel like a true high schooler, perhaps, but you played the role. And then eventually, you became that role. You felt like a high schooler. Now, going into college, you might feel like you're a high schooler still when you get there, and you're just playing a role. But eventually, you become what role you are playing. You become and feel like a college student. So Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment is a good example of this, where he randomly assigns college students to either play a prison guard or a prisoner, and the simulation became so real and so intense for many of the prisoners that they actually had to stop it short 6 days after it started, because people were having psychological distress under this, because the role that the guards and the prisoners were playing started to become themselves, even though they knew they were in an experiment. So another thing we can experience because of our attitudes and our actions is cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is the theory that we act in ways to reduce our discomfort we feel when two of our thoughts are inconsistent with each other. So for example, I might feel like liars are bad people, and then I might lie. So now that feels uncomfortable when someone points that out, right? And then I have to justify it. Well, I just lied because it was really going to hurt that person if I told the truth. So that's why I lied. Oh, feel better now. So we feel that cognitive dissonance. It feels really uncomfortable. And then we find ways to justify it to feel better. So another example, purchasing a new car that is not fuel efficient, and then someone pointing out that it's not fuel efficient, even though we try to say that we are environmentally conscious and aware. We feel this dissonant feeling. If we eat meat while also calling ourselves an animal lover, we feel this dissonance and we have to justify it. Well, I eat chickens and I eat beef and not like, I don't eat like cute thing. I eat just chicken. Like that's not cute. And so that's okay. Or they're not smart as dogs. So that's okay. We try to justify what we're doing. And there's plenty more examples of this. I think you get the idea. So our takeaways, remember that our actions impact our attitude. If you want to change your attitude about something, start by changing your behavior. Your attitude is likely going to follow that. If you want to persuade someone to do something, maybe start with a really small request like foot in the door. And be aware of the fundamental attribution error, that idea that we tend to assume what other people do is because of their disposition, who they are. When in reality, situation is powerful, and we know that when we look at ourselves and say, oh yeah, I'm not lazy, I just have a lot going on, and that's why I didn't do my homework. And maybe that's true for Susie also. So that sums up Module 74, and I will